Three, count of two, count of one. This episode is dedicated to Kelli Messer. I miss you, Starshine. In the same way, women are to be worthy of respect, not malice talkers, but temperate and trustworthy in everything. 1 Timothy 3:11.
If men could get pregnant, abortion would be a sacrament. Florynce Kennedy.
Welcome to Heresy and Hearsay, a podcast to reclaim faith in the context of political discussion. I'm Reverend Barney, and you can follow me on most socials at SethRothII. Heresy and Hearsay has a Patreon website where you can find us at patreon.com/Heresy and Hearsay. And I promise to start updating it. I promise. Where you can find our past shows and a way to help us. Just $2 a month goes a long way to make this humble show. And my co-host, this show's RBG, September.
Hi, I'm September, also known as Ninof12. You can follow me at Ninof12.com. Get all my podcasts and other work there. And you can follow this show on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and any podcast catcher. Just look for Heresy and Hearsay. Please like, share, follow, and subscribe to us, and give us a review. That really helps other people find us. You can find our first volume of podcast of this show on YouTube and Patreon.
Devil is amongst us. Stay back, boy. This calls for divine intervention. I kick ass for the Lord.
I'm sorry, I had to type that real quick because I forgot it's supposed to play after the quotes. And I'm like,
I know. I almost played it, but you started talking, and I was like, I'll just see what happens.
And like, oh no, I forgot. It's like, how can I forget our quote? What we. Yeah, like,
You're the boss. I just take the cues.
Yeah, and I forgot the cue. Like, jeez. Well, we're starting off well with this dedicated show to somebody, aren't we? All right. Anyway.
Oh, she knows. She knew what fuck ups we are. Like, it's fine.
That's true. She's been on she's been on your show. She was on your show a couple of times, I think. Your old show,
Geek
Geek Grills. Yeah. So yeah, she knows. Anyways, so today's we're going to talk about this election and how important it is for women, their health, and their bodies, and their autonomy, as well as us not becoming a handmail, maiden tail state, because that's what the threat is currently between Trump and J.D. Vance. So. But before we have that discussion, Brother Bowie, will you lead us in a word of prayer?
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
On June 24th, 2022, the Supreme Court in Dobbs versus Jackson threw out 50 plus years of law, removing Roe as a right of the land and sent it back to the states. Ew. Since then, 20 or more states have enacted laws making it from harder to impossible to get abortion care. And yeah, I'm like, ew on the send it back to the states. Y'all can yell about your rights and that's how it should be, but that was also the argument they made for slavery for reasons.
Yeah. And this is the problem with going back to the states is because it makes, if you are a woman in Texas or a woman in Georgia, because, and we'll get to this, but they just reinstated the 6-week ban in Georgia. If you're a woman in one of those states, you are immediately a second-class citizen. And the reason Roe was so important to be the law of the land and everything else is to avoid creating second-class citizenship to women because they'd have to decide what state they're going to live in, to work in, to live, or whatever, to make sure that they get the proper health care that they need and deserve.
Well,
So,
true, and their hollow argument that they keep saying, well, I mean, the government shouldn't decide for everybody because in one state, people might feel one way, and in other states they have different needs and might feel another way about it, and they should be able to decide for themselves. That is a twisted and hollow argument, because we're not talking about the needs of your road repair funding because you live in a northern state versus a southern state and have different stuff you need and different amounts of maintenance. You're talking about a woman's right to make decisions about her own body and her own health. That's a universal human right that has been denied and put down to being subject to other people's votes.
right, and the courts are supposed to protect supposed to protect the minority's rights, for which women aren't a minority, but the courts are designed to protect minority rights, so against mob rule, basically, because it's easy to basically, drum up enough fervor or enough BS to where minority rights are trampled on, and that's what the courts were initially designed to do, is protect minority rights and protect these kind of rights.
And women are a minority. Even though we're not mathematically a minority, we're less than people. So,
right, that's what.
And are subject to discrimination. Yeah.
Right. And we can talk about all the other discrimination that happens to women and everything else, but because it's still very prevalent as far as the sexual harassment and all of this kind of stuff. You just have to look at like the video game systems and video game companies and all the stuff that came out in the last 4 or 5 years of how horrible they treated women in the workplace. And it's systemic, and it's kind of universal in a way. How many women senators do we have in the Senate right now versus how many women there are in the nation?
Right.
That's a huge thing to talk about and think about. So the fact that women are still discriminated against and get paid less, there's still that going on, and then you add on top of that now we're limiting healthcare in certain states, and they talk about you talked about taking it so that the people could decide. Most of the time when it is actually put on the ballot, it is much liberal than what that state's representatives, quote unquote, want. Because again, we have an outdated representative system. Look at the gerrymandering in North Carolina. I don't think if it was ever put on the ballot that North Carolina would have a 15-week abortion ban. But because of the fact that we have gerrymandering in the House and the State House and the State Senate, and there are so many rural areas that are overly represented versus areas that have much more population, then you get that 15-week ban. I'm surprised it's only 15 weeks. I'll be perfectly honest. And, we had a turncoat in the Democratic Party go Republican so that she could give them the supermajority so that her district would be safe after that point because they gerrymandered her district. But, that when she did that, the outcry in the state was huge and dramatic, because it gave our state house supermajority, meaning they could roll over our governor when it comes to whatever they want to do, and they wanted this 15-week abortion ban. Like I said, I'm surprised it's only 15 weeks, but it's still, that's bad.
Yeah.
But it's, and the laws are badly written because these are written by non-doctors. They don't know what it's like. Lawrence O'Donnell when the Georgia stuff came out about the two women that died needlessly because of the abortion ban there. And when he was talking about and how he got choked up about how his mother, who had 7 children because she's Catholic and everything else, and had to have a DNC. This was before Roe was even a law. That DNCs were just considered normal. Were considered just the thing that happens, especially with women who have, miscarriages. I have a friend of mine who had multiple miscarriages, and it devastated her every time, and she had to have DNCs. She lives in the state that now, if she needs a DNC, they have to wait until she's almost dead before they will give her a DNC. And that's just malpractice. And it's nothing that the doctors can do, because they could either get sued at best or be thrown in jail at worst. And help me out here, September.
I've spoken about it before, and it's really difficult looking at these cases and knowing. I can't help. Like, they don't know. Like you said, they're not doctors. They don't know. They don't understand. A DNC is part of an abortion, other than one that can be managed with simple medication, and even sometimes then. But it's early term, you got to scrape the lining and reset, the uterus so it can work again, instead of you ending up with toxicity in the body. And this is really hard to talk about. Okay. I had an abortion when I was around 22 or 23, no, maybe 24. I don't know. In my 20s, I had an abortion. I had a situation where I'm incredibly fertile. I have never had unprotected sex and not gotten pregnant. So the one time I had a one-night stand with someone I had known almost my whole life, in a stupid way, I found myself pregnant. I was living like in my grandmother's basement at the time, trying to help her out and get my own feet under me, and had the abortion. And then a couple of days later, I was in excruciating pain, and it wouldn't go away. And I was calling the doctor and talking to him, and Motrin wasn't handling it. They kept upping the dose, and it wasn't handling it. And I had to go in and get a DNC to remove tissue that was missed in the procedure. And I was able to do that. With the laws the way they are now, not only would I maybe not been able to get the abortion, it was like super, super early. Like, I realized right away because I knew the possibility was there, but this was before they had morning after pills. It didn't exist then. I would have done that. It's a handful of cells, whatever. But I had to find a ride. I didn't have a car at the time. Be driven back to the doctor and have this procedure. If it happened today, for any number of reasons, if I needed a DNC, I could very well have just been left to die, because the doctors would be so afraid of being prosecuted for something they weren't even doing. It was, a separate procedure than the abortion even then. But I would have probably gotten sepsis and then organ failure and then died in excruciating pain. And the position we're in now, and that's why I just wanted to lay that out, because of my personal experience with that particular thing, and the risk and the pain. But even for women who aren't having abortions, they've got something like a tubal pregnancy, and that needs to be removed. And then, you need to do a DNC. Somebody who has polycystic ovarian syndrome, and the buildup, ends up in a bad place in the uterus, and they, at some point, every once in a while, need to get a D&C because the body isn't doing, what it should, expelling everything, and so they end up septic. There's just a lot of actual medical reasons that don't have anything to do with abortion that this D&C procedure needs to happen. But some people with very little education on the matter think a D&C, they equate it with an abortion. And it's just not. Last year, when I lost my granddaughter, there had been a uterine abruption, a placental separation, and the baby had passed. And they spent 8 hours trying to deliver this baby, and there's part of me that wonders, I know they were trying to preserve her ability to be able to have children in the future, but she was internally bleeding and almost died. And I can't help but wonder, because all of this was in play then. These laws, if they were really just trying to cover their asses, they should have gone in like they ended up doing, done the cesarean, and they had to sew up her uterus, but of course they also had to do D&C to clear out all kinds of blood and dead cells to try and let the body heal itself.
And yeah, and the problem with, like I said, these laws being written by legislators is that they don't bring in experts, because, as we know, or as it's been documented, a lot of the GOP individuals, especially those who are of the MAGA persuasion, don't trust experts, don't trust doctors, and so when they write their laws, they think they know the best.
Yeah.
And
by the way, I do want to say what it stands for. It's dilation and cutterage, if people don't know what a D&C is. Dilation refers to the cervix being open so that you can get an instrument in there and scrape the lining of the uterus, basically. And sometimes it's used as diagnostically. I wanted to point that out, too. Like, to find out why abnormal bleeding has happened and test the tissue.
Right, and just like what you talked about, with your experience of having to have the D&C, that's what was going on with one of the young ladies in Georgia. Is that she had an abortion and that she needed the D&C, and they basically, because of how the law was written, though this was a separate procedure entirely, they waited until she went to septics and her organs started to fail, and by then it was too late, and she died, and it was completely preventable. All they had to do was do the D&C when she first came in, and she would have been alive and taking care of her son.
And we're on the side of this is her right to do. But I know that there's assholes out there who think, well, she had an abortion, so she got what she deserved, or whatever the fuck that's about. But please be aware that denying this coverage also prevents women from getting the care they need, because they want to be able to have children again, let alone live.
Right, because one of the things that we've mentioned over and over again is about late term abortions, which are not they're not elective. They are. This is a medical emergency situation. Just like with your daughter-in-law, it was not. They wanted to have this child, but they had to. The baby had already passed. And there's a myriad of reasons why that you do a late-term abortion, but they are less than 1% of abortions that happen in this nation, and they happen because of medical reasons. When you talk about saving the life,
and they talk about the language. I'm sorry, that fired me up. You're exactly right.
Go ahead.
And J.D. Vance's language and Trump's language in that debate about letting the baby be born and then letting it die. Bullshit. Not true. That would be against the Hippocratic oath of any doctor ever. No, that's twisting things like what happened to my grandbaby. Because you could say tactically she was full term, and that they're twisting that into some, nobody just lets or causes a fully formed infant to die on purpose. That's murder. And that's not what's happening. And it's a small percentage. It's less than actual voter fraud. Like,
Yeah.
these women who, like, desperately have to let go of or a partner that is in that, like, mom's gonna die if she continues to try to carry this child.
Right.
I know women who have been, like, in that situation where, like, you should not, you cannot, if you try to carry this baby to term, you're gonna die. And that should be their decision. You've got X number of other children, you know, maybe you want to have more, but something is really, really, really wrong that they just figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And you've already got the nursery painted, but, like, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And sometimes it happens, like, right there on the table. No one's not trying to save both.
Right. I will give an when I was in youth camp at the beach in Myrtle Beach, there was a reverend there talking about his life experiences, and he talked about how, you know, his wife was his first wife was giving birth, was, you know, pregnant and everything else, and the doctors found that the baby was, you know, for I don't remember the exact details because this was 30 years ago. Forgive me. There's been a lot of drugs and hits to the head. So, but basically, you know, the doctor came to them and was like, "Do you want to try to save the life of the child or the life of the mother?" And he chose the mother. Now, that, you know, this was in the 90s and stuff and everything, but it was still controversial to say something like that at a youth camp as a reverend. But, you know, and unfortunately both died. But it's one of those situations where they, you know, when they talk about life of the mother, this is the exact stuff they talk about. This is the exact thing that they mean, is life of the mother. And then they write these laws to where it doesn't protect the life of the mother, where you can't get a DNC or where you can't get, you know, that kind of care until the mother is about to pass away. That, you know, the Harris, the Harris Walls campaign has a woman from Texas that's on the campaign trail talking about these issues and how she had to go, I think was Arizona, or she had to fly to Arizona while she was nearly bleeding out, you know, because she was dying. But she also, you know, to save her life and the possibility of her having children again, because this was like their third child. They were looking forward to this child, and something went horribly wrong. And the state of Texas has made it so barbaric that, you know, she had to get, and she could afford it. She could afford to fly, but how many women in Texas can't? How many women in Mississippi or Alabama or North Carolina or Georgia don't have those opportunities to get on a plane and fly to a state that it is safe? And that's part of the problem, is that they're having to make that decision of, do I stay in this state that I love, or do I move to make sure that if something bad happens while I'm pregnant, I won't fucking die? And that's the bullshit of all of this. That is the grossness of all of this. That, you know, and I'm going to say this, it's a bunch of old white men for the most part that are, you know, or you know, sycophants that that are making these laws. Because when they put it on the vote for, you know, like Ohio and Kansas, of all places, Kansas, which is a very conservative state, when they put it on the ballot, it was more liberal than anybody thought it would be for Kansas, because people understand. The people want this to be the law of the land. This is this is why, you know, in 2022, after the Dobbs decision, you know, typically if you're a Republican president, you're going to lose the House and the Senate. If you're a Democratic president, you're going to lose the House and the Senate on the off years, on the non-presidential years. That's typically how it works. It's been that way for decades. There's supposed to be a red wave that happened in 2022. They barely got the House, and that's only because of gerrymandering and New York's fuck-ups as far as how they fix their system. But for the most part, that wave didn't happen because of Dobbs, because people were like, oh no, this fucking ain't gonna happen again. We're not going to let them be able to do this. And this is why it's so important to make sure that, Harris gets in the White House. We talked, in 2020 and 2016, I was banging this drum, and it's like, think about the Supreme Court. Think about the Supreme. I don't care if you don't like Clinton or not. I was not a Clinton fan. Think about the Supreme Court, because there could be, at the time, there was at least one or two that could have been. There was one that was sitting there that needed to be put in, and then there was possibly one or two others that could have happened, and it did. And that's why Trump was able to put in crazy people into the court that are going to be there for decades, making laws such as overturning Roe v. Wade and giving presidential immunity.
And it was part of the plan. I mean, it's in think tank documents. Like, we talk about Project 2025, and people need to understand what's in there and what the playbook is, because stuff like this has been in the playbook of the right for a very long time, to take rights away from contingencies that don't tend to vote for them. And that's a scary dictatory thing. On the religious aspect, I want to give props to the Jewish faith.
Yeah.
For being very clear about their life doesn't begin at conception. Right. Life begins at the first breath after birth. Right. That they explicitly place that morally in that system of ethics, that the mother's life is to be preserved. It is valuable. It is being lived, and carrying, just the effect on the world and others. Like, they are very clear and very pro-choice in that manner, that the life of the mother takes precedent.
Right. And I, as a Christian, I have a problem with as soon as conception happens, it's like, no. At that point, if it's not, this is my view on the thing. If it's not viable outside the womb, then it's not a child. It is a bunch of cells. Yes, you can hear.
And the book, they didn't know how it even worked. They didn't have the word, the words or the science to have any idea. Like, oh my God. to say when life began, other than the way the Older Testament and the Jewish text still, babies are born and then they are alive.
Right.
Can we stick with that? I'm all for science and including science in our practices in the real world, because if you know better, you do better. But it's not cell splitting, and we're never going to know when the soul enters the body, right?
Right. For all we know, the soul enters the body as soon as it takes its first breath. I mean,
right?
It
might be floating around in the air.
Yeah, what it is, as soon as the breath happens, that's when it intakes the soul. So we don't know, because we, as people of faith, we have no understanding of where the soul starts or where it begins or how it forms. But what we do know is how life is, and we do know how important it is to preserve life as far as where women are concerned. And what?
Well, except y'all believe in this original sin bullshit that you blame on women, so that's kind of a problem that is at the root of some of this. In the patriarchy in general, not you.
I blame Satan. Could it be Satan that did it? Yeah, I tend to believe that. It's like, I think if Adam was the first one to meet the serpent, he would have ate the apple first. So, whatever. So that's my tending to believe on that. So, and don't even get me started on the Lilith thing. But anyway, that's a whole nother kettle of fish right there. But one of the I had a thought and I lost it. I'm sorry. Give me a second here. But I was going to go off on a tangent. It's probably best that I didn't go out. My tangent is like real quick is like these people are like, oh, we're right to life. We believe in life. It's like, all right, what about the death penalty? At least when I look at the Catholics and their fundamentalism about abortion and everything else, at least most Catholics are the ones that I dealt with in school and was my professors and everything else and the monks and everything else. They also didn't believe in the death penalty. They believed in the preservation of life on either end. So that is also extremely hypocritical, as far as like, oh, well, we don't mind the death penalty, but this woman who gotten pregnant 8 weeks ago, oh, she can't have an abortion. It's like, fuck you, make up your mind. Either you're pro-life or you're not, and that's the thing. And that's why I don't believe the word pro-life. I believe that, just as Carlin said, it's pro-pregnancy, and once the baby's born, they don't give a fuck. That's the other thing.
I'll stick with anti-choice because I really believe the primary political motivation is to take choice away. There are people that it's their moral belief and the pro-lifers, they call themselves that because they think they're protecting infants, and I feel that they are misguided. I believe that movement and the result of that movement is anti-choice. And choice about, because it's bigger. It's bigger than just the pregnancy.
Right.
Sometimes it's not even pregnancy. It's just a choice about, I might want to in the future instead of being ruined or dying. And then I know you have notes here. We're going to get into the whole next part of their plan and stuff they've tried to do in the past already with birth control. And it's anti-choice. IVR feeds in because you got people like J.D. Vance going, well, women shouldn't be able to choose to just have a career and then babies later in life, they should be making the babies.
Right. And the thing is that
like we're machines for that.
Yeah, like your broodmares. That's
we're
all
things. Yeah.
Right. I may have told the story like once long ago, but when we first talked about Dobbs, but I remember when I had dated a young lady for a little while and we broke up. It just didn't work out, but we were still friendly. That's how most of my exes go. It's just it's not working out, but that's fine. We can still be friends. I remember getting a call from her and be like, I need you to take me to the abortion clinic in Charlotte. And I'm like, oh, okay, what happened? And she explained to me that she was an RA, or actually an RD at a college, which was a very conservative college, and she had gotten raped. And, she didn't want to carry her rapist baby to term and whatever. So I was like, sure. And it's like, I'm a giant 6'5" man. And, luckily there wasn't many protests that particular day. There were some, and they tried. And I just, gave them a look as I walked in with her because I'm a 6'5" giant. And it's like, so it's like, come step up, please. Please, I am in the mood for a fight today.
So my tactic, because I've done escorting and counter-protesting, there was a Planned Parenthood in my hometown up north, and they didn't even provide abortions. Actually, was it the Comstock Act or whatever? They were
right.
They were barred from even mentioning, like they couldn't say the word, they couldn't refer you, they couldn't even talk about abortion. But the kooks were out there with their big signs with aborted fetuses and stuff,
Right.
marching around and intimidating women who were just going to get their pills.
Right.
Because most of those people are also anti-birth control, weirdly.
Right.
Because, well, I mean, there's this contingent of Catholics that thinks that birth control is a sin. But,
Yeah, one of my...
they go preconception, they're crazy. But they're out there marching around, and I had just been through... So, my daughter, Courtney, who just found me 3 years ago?
3 years ago? Yeah, I think it's 3, maybe 4.
Yeah, finding day was September 29th. But anyway, when I was pregnant with her, I was really sick. I had never been regular. I had a lot of stuff going on. I had been kicked out of my house. I was couch surfing. I was when I discovered I was pregnant. Like, I had been to the doctor a couple of times, and I had only once had sex in my entire life. And I was 16, and it was a couple months in. I was given medication for, like, they thought it was a flu, they thought it was this, and then I had a reaction to medication. I got hives. Like, I only recently, I'm 55, got it taken off my records that I'm allergic to penicillin, because I'm not. I just had a reaction to it, probably because I was pregnant, but nobody knew. And then it was like, it's possible you're pregnant. Like, I guess it is. And I was far enough along that it was a couple months in, and the procedure at that time in the 1980s was pretty rough. I was basically going to be given a whole lot of Valium, induced,
right,
and give birth to a fetus that could not survive. And I could not. I was going to, and then I couldn't. I canceled it. I carried that baby to term. I gave her up for adoption. I was told to not come back to church or confirmation class for being a horrible sinner in the process. But
we've had that discussion.
Yeah. But so there were these protests going on around my Planned Parenthood, and when I went to get, my birth control, not long after that, and I was like, wow, okay. I got an idea. So I got a clipboard, which has been my weapon of choice ever since. A clipboard and a legal pad, and just went up and started talking to those folks and telling them I was collecting names. I knew an adoption lawyer and the name of some agencies I could refer them to if they'd really like to help with this unwanted pregnancy problem. And these, women are going through some really difficult decisions right now, and I'd love to take their name and address to be able to refer them to these agencies to take responsibility for these children that these women cannot support.
Right. And of course...
they didn't like that much. But they didn't yell and scream at me, and thankfully no one beat me up. I was warned to don't do this, someone's going to kill you. But it wasn't quite to... so many people being armed in those situations like it was today. There were bombings happening, but they just shied away, and eventually the group dispersed, and I won. With just logic.
You don't mean it. Yeah.
Right. You don't mean that you want to support every child that is conceived. Not when it's on your dime.
Yeah. And a lot of the these groups are it is a control thing. It is to control women, to put them back in the kitchen and everything else. It's to take them out of, the current individual that's running for governor of our state, Mark Robinson, feels that women should lose their right to vote. J.D. Vance feels that unless you have children, you should, women shouldn't be able to vote as much.
Oh, and who is the dumbass who came at Kamala about she doesn't have children, what's keeping her humble, even though she does have children, stepchildren. Some of us are out here are not aspiring to being humble. That's not what we're for. Humility is a different thing than being humbled to
Right.
only taking up the space that you are allowed.
And if you want to speak, and real quick, if you want to speak about Sarah Huckabee, whatever her last name is, whatever married name is, I don't remember. But if you want to speak about her, a couple of years ago, she signed a law that child labor could happen in her state while at the, and the Justice, yeah, I know, yes. And the Justice Department just filed complaints against Tyson because they had children as young as 11 working in hazardous conditions. I'm like, what the absolute fuck is that? It's like you want to protect these children, but only because you need more work labor. And I'm like, did we not pass a bunch of laws to make sure that children didn't die in factories? Wasn't that kind of the point? If you're wanting to protect children, what the fuck is this bullshit?
So my first vote ever was for Dukakis, and I will tell you it was heavily influenced back then. I think it was my first leaning left, besides being in a union household, was having to go to work because during the recession, during the Reagan era, because, St. Reagan and his horrible policies, emptying out institutions and ridding people of mental health care and calling AIDS gay cancer. And yeah, there's a million bad policies, but one was my mother got laid off from GM for a very long time. So, and she was at a union contract, so she got unemployment, but then she also got copay, from the union, subpay, from the union, and we were able to survive and stuff. And then it runs out, like unemployment runs out, and subpay is just a little bit, and it's not enough. So when there are long recessions, the government can extend unemployment insurance, similar to the mechanics they used to make payments during the pandemic, to extend unemployment or get it passed quicker. They just have that power. So, no, Reagan didn't do that. Instead of extending unemployment until the economy recovered enough for my mom to go back to work, or even, just for a little while, he did allow for special working papers that I got at 14 to go work full-time in a state-run hospital laundry with a mangler, which is such a dangerous machine that Stephen King has written a short story about it. In the summer, I spent a summer working this job in incredible heat and shitty conditions, where this laundry it was also near a jail. So when people escaped the Niagara County Jail, they'd sometimes find them in the laundry over at the state hospital. So yeah, I did that for a summer because Reagan thought child labor was a better solution because, bootstraps or whatever the fuck, than extending unemployment for a little while.
Yeah. And yeah, so again, we've talked about this, but it's, they claim they want to protect children, but they really don't. They just want to control women. They want to, and basically there's two things that are working as far as what one is that they want to control women. The other one is that the white replacement theory, where, there's immigrants coming in and everything else, and they've talked about it, and, how more white people need to have children. And the only way they can do that, especially seeing white women have statistically more advantages than those of color, is they're able to, is to force them to have children and everything else. And it's gross on so many levels because of
it's white supremacist bullshit. Right.
But just because you can't have an abortion, but you still want to, let's say you're a woman who's in a relationship, a committed relationship or not, it doesn't matter to me, whatever, and you like to enjoy yourself and physical pleasures and everything else, and you want to make sure that you're safe as far as that's concerned, and that you don't get pregnant. They want to take away your ability to have to have birth control pills or birth control in general. Not IVS. What are the what are the ones that are inserted?
IUD.
I don't. IUD. Thank you. It's like I am a man, so I don't know all these terms. I apologize.
It's okay.
But IUD and stuff like that. They want to take the GOP blocked reproductive rights again. By blocking a vote to protect birth control. And the thing is, most Kelli had to take birth control, even though she had already had her tubes tied. Okay, but she had to take birth control because she still had very painful and very troubling period cycles, and this helped regulate them and help protect her from those going really bad.
Yeah. Hormone replacement. It's healthcare.
Yeah. It's health. Even if it's birth control, it's not just for birth control. It's part of it, but it's not the whole. In fact, I would say it's about a 50-50 where it's birth control versus healthcare. If that, I'm just saying that it's, that.
And same, yeah. I had an IUD, so I didn't bleed to death.
Right. So it's one of those things where they want to, where not only are they wanting to control women so that they're forced to carry babies to term, but they're also making it harder and harder, or they want to make it harder and harder, because this is talked about in Project 2025, and J.D. Vance has talked about this. It's not in the Agenda 47 paperwork per se, but J.D. Vance is probably going to push for this, about birth control and everything else, and how he thinks it's wrong as a whole, because I don't know. But
okay, and he keeps dodging this in a weird way, where he keeps saying, "We don't need to talk about that. You're just trying to stir things up because, it's not like that law could pass anyway with national bans, right? For instance, with the abortion ban nationally, that's still okay. Maybe that's true. It gets less true every time you guys win, and you keep bringing it up and stoking this conversation into a dangerous place. So, you don't get to yell fire in a crowded theater because no one's going to believe me. That's not how this works.
Yeah. It's like, how about you answer the fucking question anyways? Let's say the bill shows up on your desk. What the fuck are you going to do? That's the question. Yeah. I'm not asking if it will actually happen. I'm asking, here's the hypothetical. It did happen. It is on your desk. What the fuck are you going to do? And answer the bloody question.
Well, it'll be what the people want at that point. There's always something, but they've yeah.
But and again, if they try to send it back to the states, it will be the same thing. It will be where some states will outlaw certain, will outlaw the morning after pill, will outlaw, abortion pills. Remember when Hobby Lobby and the Catholic Church both sued because they didn't want, because of the ACA coming out. And one of the things that the ACA did was protect women's rights for reproductive rights as far as getting birth control. Not, they couldn't legalize abortion because of the one of the acts that's in there, that federal money can't go to abortion. But, Hobby Lobby and the Catholic Church were both sued, because we don't want to cover birth control because it's akin to abortion. That's what they feel. Is that birth control, especially medical birth control, not condoms or whatever, but standard birth control is considered, in their minds, is akin to abortion, and it's just that next step. It's that next logical step for them to then outlaw abortion pills and outlaw the morning after pill and all of that kind of stuff, and that's what they want to do next. Is they want to get rid of the ability to control your body in that way. And I know women. I dated a woman that was on birth control, and she still got pregnant. these things happen, so it's not a guarantee anyways, but it is, a better, it helps women control their lives better. And that, God forbid, a woman have any control of her life whatsoever, including giving birth or deciding when to give birth.
And if you really cared for children and their well-being, and the woman in this instance is the primary, even if you get what you want, and just the men are out working and the women are staying home taking care of kids, and they've hit their maximum, right? Like,
right.
Mentally, emotionally, financially, forcing women to keep having them babies if they want to have any sex, or because they're also supposed to submit whenever their husband wants. The children, after the capacity for another human to take care of another human being, which is already a big job, even at just one, and two isn't double of one, I promise you it exponentially multiplies the capacity of a woman to care for and be responsible for whole human beings, because I've done it. I have 3 boys, and I could not have handled more. No matter what you think God is trying to give me, they would have been less well taken care of.
Right.
And I certainly couldn't have taken care of myself with any more. Trust women. Trust us.
Right. And it's one of those situations. There was, what was the case where the woman, did horrible things to her children after she had 5 of them, because she was part of this group that, she was required to, give herself to her husband and have as many children as possible. It wasn't the empty quiver or the full quiver group, but something similar. And she had postpartum depression because it was like bang, 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 one right after the other. And, she mentally could not handle it. And her husband was checked out because that's women's stuff. I don't need to deal with that kind of thing. And, and a tragedy happened. A horrible tragedy happened because of that. Instead of, listening, the woman probably had said, I can't do this anymore. And he just probably blew her off because of religious beliefs and stuff like that. And as a religious person, as a theologian, that's why I read that quote. They are, let me read it again. In the same way, women are to be worthy of respect. This is in the Bible. Why can't people, why is it all of a sudden that you can't do this? Why is it suddenly that they're supposed to be all of a sudden submissive as well, and you're not supposed to listen to them? Even in Ephesians, when they talk about man and woman marriage and stuff like that, when C.S. Lewis talks about it and everything else, he still, is very competent about explaining that women still are supposed to be respected and are supposed to be listened to, and that you're supposed to take their advice and you're supposed to, hear what they have to say. Because it's important, because you're 2 made into 1 according to the Bible. You're 2 made into 1. That means that you're supposed to work as a team. And if one of the team is suffering, you're supposed to find out why and help and make sure that they aren't suffering. And if that means that, you're putting extra strain on them because they can't handle having another child, then that's what birth control is. That's what all of this other stuff is about, is to help them have control of themselves, because women know their bodies better than any man will ever know a woman's body, even if they're a gynecologist. A woman understands their body much better. And we already know that women are blown off by doctors when they deal with pain, when they deal with suffering, and everything else. That is just statistics.
Yeah.
That women are less listened to anyways by doctors, about their bodies anyways. But women know their bodies better than anybody. And better, and we should listen when they're saying what their bodies are needing. And we're not. Or as part of the nation doesn't want to. Women are just silly, hysterical, whatever. I don't know what their actual. If I haven't sat down with someone and asked them, that is this radical about it, and asked them, what do you think women are? Why do you think that you need to control their bodies and control their health care? Is it because you don't trust their choices? Is it because you think that just like, women are just willy-nilly going and having abortions? These change their lives. Women don't make these decisions just because. These are important decisions that they sit and think about. And they think about it afterwards, no matter what the decision is. It is a huge decision in their life. And it's not something they take lightly. No one takes that lightly. But, even with that, even if you want to wait to have a child and everything else, they're not going to help you with that either, because they feel that you should be having a child immediately as soon as you're fertile. We can get into that later. But it's out there, but, they feel that women shouldn't wait. That if they need to get pregnant whenever it happens, to give themselves to God and let God make that decision if they get pregnant or not. And, versus, IVF. And some women may have been trying since they were in their 20s and still can't do it. And, that's where IVF comes in, because they want to be mothers. But one of the fundamental things that concerns them is because how IVF works. My understanding of it is that basically with the embryos, it's more than one. That's where the octomom comes in. Is basically they put all of the embryos that were, basically turned into embryos, put them all in her, so she'd have 8 children. Gross. But the point is that there's multiple choices. But once the woman's pregnant, what happens to those embryos that weren't used to impregnate the woman? They're destroyed, typically, or they are destroyed. And to them, that is just the same as abortion. So if IVF is a thing, then you're still allowing abortion because of all of this. And so you have to outlaw IVF. And there are women who desperately want to have children. I know of one who could not, even with IVF, have a child. She desperately wanted to have a child in the worst possible way. And we know, and both of us know someone who had IVF and had a child, a very beautiful child, and everything else because of IVF. They were able to conceive a child, and it's, it's a blessing. These are people who want to have children, but because of the implications of what happens to those other embryos, they don't. IVF should be banned as well, and everything else and the Catholic Church believe it's God's will, and I'm like, no. It's like, God gave us the ability to reason and think and therefore come up with science, so science could do things to make our lives better. That's why you don't see so many quote-unquote miracles like God showing up and touching people. Because we have science now. Because we have medicine now. And if you don't see science as the miracle that God has provided to us, then you're blinded by everything else, and it's gross. And it's disgusting, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of people discounting science as part of God's plan, because it is part of God's plan, or it wouldn't be here.
Yep. One of my favorite plays has that premise.
What premise is that?
So when I was in high school, I was a weirdo then. I did a thing in my public speaking class where my friend Jessica dressed in all white and I dressed in all black, and it was a play, and it's hard to find the script for it, but we did a scene from a play where it was a discussion between God and the devil, and I got risers brought in from the band room, so we were standing above everyone, like we were standing up in the clouds having this discussion, and God was stressing about the garden and the apple and tempting them with all that knowledge, and Satan was purporting that oh, but I mean, you want that because if they're praising you for the flowers, they're loving that, they're gonna praise you for knowing about the stamen and the and the chlorophyll all the more
Well, yeah, and I think and I honestly do believe that us understanding science and everything is a blessing, is part of the miracle of we had to get to the point where we could get to this point where we could reason for ourselves. There's you talk about Stephen King, and one of his books he talks about is like God sitting up in the bleachers is saying, now if you can figure out the tilt of why the Earth is tilted, then you've got something, and you're on your way. And then I can sit back and let you be the miracle workers, and and that's the whole thing is that we have the science, we have the technology, we can do a lot of amazing things now. So, all right. So next week we're going to be talking about LBTQ.
LGBTQ.
Plus, yes. Things as far as what you can expect if you're under a Trump administration versus what you can expect under a Harris administration. And then the following week we're going to basically do our closing. We're going to try to close the deal, always be closing kind of situation, where I'm going to come at it from kind of a religious perspective, and I'll have, and September will come at it from a political perspective of why you should vote for Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz, VP Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz. And then we probably will not do a show on election week because we won't know the election and it'll be weird. I haven't decided that, but we'll do a show the following week with the election results, and hopefully we will not be, tearing our hair out. So,
yeah.
With that being said, let's move to Carrot and Stick.
What's up, Doc?
So the carrot is record early voting in Georgia. That's great to see. North Carolina's early voting. We're recording on Wednesday, the 16th. The 17th is tomorrow, which is going to be the first start of early voting in North Carolina. And I expect to see record early voting for North Carolina as well tomorrow. Don't let Georgia beat us. That would be rude.
Hey, it's fine. They have an awful lot of interference stuff going on down there, and them voting early is amazing because it gives. Yeah. And I've always been a proponent of early voting for a myriad of reasons, and this year more than ever, just like telling people check your registration, this gives you time to straighten it out if you get there and there's a problem. So earlier the better anywhere, but especially Georgia right now.
Yes, and again on the 17th of October, North Carolina will start early voting. I have my absentee ballot filled out, and it's been witnessed by a notary. I want to thank my friend for doing that. She knows who she is. I want to thank her for that.
I hate how hard they made that.
Oh, it's
disgusting.
Yeah, it's either two witnesses or a notary.
Yeah. And IDs and copies of them. There's so many barriers it should be considered a vote tax, and I hope that it's that should be in court, really.
And I also have to pay for the stamp.
Yeah,
it's not free to mail it, so it's like So tomorrow I will be going to the post office via Uber because I don't have a car, and getting this mailed out. So I make sure it's mailed out a couple of weeks in advance to make sure they get it and everything else.
Oh, and you can track that online. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, I forgot to write down the number. So
it's okay. There's an online site. We'll get it to you.
Yeah. But with that, let's move on to the stick.
Don't you blaspheme in here! Don't you blaspheme in here!
So back in 2020, while people were dying and unable to get tested for COVID due to lack of the equipment, not only the testing itself, but also the equipment to run the tests, President Trump decided to send his buddy Putin the testing equipment for his own personal use. This is, if we were having a video thing, this is where you would see me lose my ever-loving mind, and we'd have to go to technical difficulties because this makes me so. I am squeezing so hard on my mic stand right now that I'm probably causing myself to bleed because this was utter bullshit. Holy fuck! Oh my god, people in our nation. I remember waiting in those lines to get tested. And how long it took back in the early days when you could not, and the only way to get tested is when someone decided to shove a stick up your nose, up to your brain stem. That was the only test that we had. And it wasn't it wasn't the tests themselves that he sent to Putin. It was the equipment to run the tests that we sent to Putin, which were even of a more limited supply than the tests themselves. And it was like, 3-4 hour waits in some cities and states to get these tests. And he's sending the equipment to see if you've got COVID or not, because you don't know. And sometimes it took weeks to get these tests back while we're sending, Putin the equipment to run these tests so that we could have possibly ran them faster to find tracing and everything else.
It's his buddy. It's his buddy.
So angry. Flames, sigh of my flames.
Yeah, well, we know he was irresponsible shithead. He's doing this stuff while, like, a friend of mine, died of COVID.
Right. Yeah. So with that, what is our call to action, September?
Vote. Do it. A lot of places you can do it right now. Just go. North Carolina starts tomorrow. Take a friend with you. Grab a family member. Tomorrow, I'm going to do like all the hyper-responsible woke shit. And I'm probably going to take my son and we're going to go get COVID shots and flu shots and vote. So we're going to get stickers and Band-Aids and it's going to be awesome. I'm excited about this privilege. Guys, it's a right, it's a privilege. And it does fucking count. It does count. Even in a red, being a blue dot in a red place, it counts and it matters for the future and people, like, looking at, like, finding you in the sea. It matters in ways you can't even imagine. And I'm speaking of the things I learned about that in my professional career, as well as wanting this election to be so... overwhelmingly, it is secure. I promise these people are good people. I mean, we've got infiltrators, but still, the system does work. The data's there. Please vote. It's the only hope of trying to avoid another attempted insurrection, is to make these numbers overwhelming, despite what the polls are saying. We've got, especially in North Carolina, they had to arrest a guy who's running a militia who was out hunting FEMA in our disaster area here in North Carolina. And so they're ready to go, man. They're ready to go. And every speech that Mango Mussolini makes, he's ramping them up for this bullshit again. And please go vote. Just show him what a loser he is. So the other thing is vote no. If you're in North Carolina, I haven't researched all 50 states. If you've got ballot measures, look into them and look into them in neutral sources and also sources that align with, ACLU probably has one on every single measure. If you go to Al Jazeera or PBS for an article somewhere that is non-biased otherwise, but in North Carolina, vote no on the constitutional amendment ballot measure. It looks innocuous. It is not. And ballot measures are very often sneaky like that. They look like they're not going to make a change, or they look like, that should already be a thing. In North Carolina, it is. It says that, you can only vote if you're a citizen and you're 18 years old. However, this referenda, this constitutional amendment ballot measure, is designed to create more fear and xenophobia against immigrants. It eliminates the language about being naturalized. So therefore it doesn't reflect our Constitution, North Carolina, our state constitution already says and reflects the 14th Amendment constitutional language that any citizen born or naturalized can vote. The North Carolina change would eliminate naturalized. So that opens up a door. The Republicans are saying it slams the door on any questions about it. Immigrants already can't vote. Illegal immigrants absolutely can't vote, and it is built in the system when you're registered to check on it. No one who's not naturalized. My husband can't vote. I know these laws very well because he's not a citizen, even though he has had a green card for 25 years. This doesn't do anything except change the wording to leave holes in for people to try and attack the law in the future, saying that naturalized citizens don't count, and to actively discourage voting by naturalized citizens. It's to discourage them. It's to create fear, and it can open very icky, dangerous doors to changes in the future. Vote no. That just leaves the language as it is, which already protects your vote before and after for everyone that is covered in the constitutional right to vote in the 14th Amendment. So,
And you also mentioned this when we first brought this up. You also mentioned the fact that, if they require, your birth certificate or whatever versus your driver's license, at that point, if you're a married woman, your birth certificate doesn't match your driver's license.
That's different. That was a different discussion. That was about something they were trying to pass federally about ID. That was a different issue than this ballot measure.
The safe measure.
The ballot measure doesn't. That got taken out of the SAFE Act, but this ballot measure has nothing to do with that. This is a ballot measure to change the wording in our Constitution to make it more vague and more fearful.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you corrected me, but I was like, is that okay? All right. But anyways, yes, vote no. I already did. My ballot is sealed up. I just had to take it to the post office tomorrow and be able to do that. So with that being said, I want to thank you for joining. Thank you for joining us at Heresy and Hearsay. I'm Reverend Barney, and you can follow me on socials at SethRothII. You can also find the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and any podcast catcher. Just Google us.
I'm September. You can also follow me at my website. Well, you can't follow me there. That's not how that works. But anyway, you can check out Ninof12.com, and that's going to lead you to all the other shows I do. Well, most of the other shows I do. Please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Heresy and Hearsay, where $2 a month really helps keep us going. Thanks for listening today. I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little bump. The 17th, if this is up by then, I will be on a show at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on Shave Maddox's channel. I'll post it in places called Diz Nerds, and we'll be talking about The Acolyte. So anyway, thanks for listening, everyone, and bless your hearts.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.